Hello and welcome back, artists and designers. Today we are going to take a look at accomplishing this value and form worksheet here. And I went ahead and set this up, so I'll hide this for a second. So this is just a 8.5 by 11 document, 300 ppi for us right here. And I went ahead and file and placed my image in here. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this layer. Get rid of that. And I've got my value and form worksheet. And then I went ahead and just put like a base color fill with an adjustment layer in here just to give me a little bit of tone to start with. I'm going to do one last thing too. You're going to see if I start to work on a layer under this. So if I grab my brush and I fill something in here, it's going to look really weird if we leave the worksheet the way it is. So I'm going to go ahead and change the layer mode to multiply, and that's going to fix that up for me. Let's go ahead and lock that layer while we're at it so that we don't accidentally work on that layer. All right, so I'm going to select all, delete that, clear that off. So let's talk about a couple different ways to do this. I'm going to skip the value scale and the gradation up here because I think we can all handle those. You could take a rectangular selection and do each one of those with your soft edge brush. So let's talk about the more challenging parts down below. Okay, and just a reminder, don't create stripes, okay? These are suggestions where your values should be slowly changing. Okay, this goes from dark to light here, the gradation. You want to be able to do the same thing down below. All right, so we could go in here, and the most basic method would be to use our soft shading brush. We're on a new layer here. Let's call this cone, and let's approach this cone. So let's take this, and if I take my soft brush, I could kind of work my way through this and start to layer up that soft value from light up to dark. And I'm going to do this minus the shadow for right now, and I'm just going to leave the shadow and do that separately. So I could do it like that, and then essentially take my hard edged eraser. Let's grab my hard eraser here. I have this kind of elliptical version of it, and I could go through here and very carefully kind of erase out the outer edge. So that is method one. Let's see if I can do that. Erase that out here. Have that set to 100% opacity, and I'd have to be careful and clean off that edge. So that is one way to do it, is to just kind of ignore the outer shape of that and then go back when you feel like you're finished and clean up the edge. That is not my personal preferred way to do something like this. When you have a really strong hard edge that you want to keep, this to me is a bit tedious, and if I over erase, as you can see that I did in a couple spots, I'm going to have issues. I have to go back and try to reshade that, and it's not going to work too well. So I'm going to try the clipping mask method. So with the clipping mask method, as you remember, you have a base shape that you kind of fill in with a solid color, and then you have a layer that floats over top that you do your shading on. So the question is, how do we get that base layer? So let's go ahead and call this base layer here. Well, when we have a nice worksheet like this, there's a really easy way to do it. We can take the object selection tool right here, and if I take that, I just have to check this box right here, which is sample all layers, because if that is unchecked and I have nothing on my layer, it's not going to see this. So we have to tell it, hey, look at all the layers that I have here. And now when I hover over that, it sees the cone pretty quickly, or if I go over to the other shape, it's going to see that. So I click once there, give it a second to think. It does a pretty good job of finding that shape, and I could really just use that selection to do my shading, but what I want to again remind you of here is how to use the clipping mask method. So I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to very quickly grab my hard shader here, and I'm going to take white, make this really nice and big, and just make sure that I fill that whole area in. Got a funky little shape down there, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. So there we go. I have my base. I can now do Control D, deselect, and then I would do my layer over top. I would set this layer to be a clipping mask, so you can hold the Alt key down, see that nudge over. I take my soft shader right here, switch on over to black, and now I can start to build that up and get that shading, and it's automatically, once I have that set to a clipping mask, I don't have to worry about those edges anymore. So now I am able to shade pretty easily on this without really worrying about the extra added pain in the neck of going back and cleaning up the outside edges. Now again, this method works great when you have hard edged shapes like this. When you have something a little bit softer, something a little bit more freeform, you don't have a worksheet, you're going to have to define those shapes a little bit more on your own. But that is a really quick way to be able to go through and do that. So I have my base fill there of white. I use the object selection to do that, and then went ahead and created a new layer over top. Now, if you want to freeform it, that is very easy to do as well, or relatively easy. I could just create a new layer, and let's say I want to do this cylinder. Let's go ahead and make this white. Let's grab my hard elliptical brush here and make that a little bit bigger, and I could just kind of freeform this in. So go through here and color this in. This again works pretty well for holding down Shift to get a nice straight line. And this works pretty well if you have something that's more freeform. So I'm going to fill this in. So this takes a little bit more time, but again, we can't always rely on that object selection tool. But the nice thing is you put your time in here to get your base shape in that you want, whatever that shape may be. Filling that in, I'm just checking to make sure it's okay. And you can always go back and fix it up a little bit if you notice an area that's not fully filled in or something. But that looks pretty good to me. I have that. Hit my eraser up here real quick, clean that edge up. There we go. Clean this little edge up. And now I have my base cylinder, and I would do a new layer over top, hold the Alt key down, pops it over to be that clipping mask, grab my soft shader, and again, I'm kind of off here and shading. So I can do that. Build that value up nice and slow. I got my brightest highlight there, number 2 over here. And then I'll use this to show you one more thing. And I can see again, right in this area here, I didn't get my fill 100% on my base layer, but I can easily go back and correct that. It's a nice thing about having a separate layer from the shading versus the fill. So I have that. If I want to kind of work on the top of it, I could very easily do that separately. Grab my hard eraser. This is my clipping layer, so I could very easily kind of like totally erase that part, but not erase the base shape. So get rid of that. And then do one more layer over top here. Also set this to be a clipping, and that will clip back to the same shape right here. And go back in with my soft shader and work on this part separately. So I can do this, kind of try to build this up here a little bit. And if I get a little too dark on the lower portion, again, I can grab that hard eraser and I can clean up that lower portion that I just affected on it. There we go, get rid of the extra overflow shading on that. And I think that looks a little dark, a little bit dark on top there. So I could always take that soft eraser, and again, I'm only affecting that, lighten that up, brighten that up a little bit. And there we go. So that's a little bit more of a natural way to do it. Again, I can see that my base layer didn't get filled in 100%, but that's something that's really easy to go back and kind of adjust and fix up if I fill that in a little bit more there. I find that to be a little bit easier than using the overspray and erase method, but really ultimately that is something that is up to you. You've got to find your own flow and your own method of kind of doing this stuff here. So, a couple quick ways to approach this handout. You can either freeform it and then go back and do the hard erasing to kind of clean up your outline. You can do your fill with a solid color, or use the object selection to get those hard edges, put that base tone in of your color, and then go ahead and create separate layers over top where you do your shading and really kind of control that. Good luck. Take your time. Remember, you're not creating stripes. You are trying to replicate this gradation, smooth changes from dark to light to show those shapes. And I'll see you in the next video.